10 years running the Arizona Cardinals, 3 playoff appearances, NFC West title. Steve Keim is joining us. First of all, you look healthy. You look happy. How are things for you?
Doing great, man. Enjoying the summer and some time off, and looking forward to the football season as we're all listening to your quarterback rankings. And I'm sure there's a lot of variances of opinions, but certainly fun for me to listen to.
So Justin Fields is an interesting one because out of college, I think we all thought, whoo, he's got a whip. He can move. But a lot of people were like, Ohio State, you got the best receivers in the conference, the best left tackle. You go back, throw a drag route, suddenly it's a touchdown against Purdue. Were you a huge Justin Fields guy out of the draft?
When I would say huge, I mean, certainly not in the Mahomes, Kyler Murray in that area, but a guy that I knew had the skill set and a tremendous amount of talent. The real question would be is, can he put it together consistently at this level, which comes down to a lot of different narratives, which is whether you can read and see coverage, whether you have the ability to process and make quick decisions on the move. Obviously, at some point, guys like that, their athleticism, their ability to escape becomes really just second nature. But at the same time, you got to play within the pocket at times, and it's a huge deal.
Yeah, no, he is a pocket quarterback right now. To his defense, they haven't had a ton, but they got Robert Tonyan now with Cole Kmet, Mooney, DJ Moore, Claypool, and I think they found a left tackle a couple years ago in the draft. They've got pieces. Yeah. So the Saquon Barkley deal comes up, and I'd said there's only 2 running backs in the league that have made more that are currently playing. Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. I feel he's been fairly compensated. He got drafted early. What do you make of the franchise tag? If you ran the Giants, did that seem reasonable? Did their offer seem reasonable?
I did not see their offer, but I do know that after having a number of backs that I've dealt with over my time, generally the analytics will tell you that the second contract is not as productive in many regards as the first. You want to try to get the banging out of the way on your first contract, and the second contract, you want to reward the player, but at the same time, you got to be smart about it. And generally, history tells us that paying backs is not the most smart decision in the NFL.
Yeah. So Hard Knocks with Aaron Rodgers, they pushed back against it. Steve, I've never been a fan. I like the Netflix series where they concentrate on a quarterback every week and they're not intrusive. I don't like Hard Knocks. I think you're hurting people, and the NFL doesn't need more publicity, right? Like they're getting plenty of it. When you talk to GMs or yourself, what has been your feeling, especially if you got some chaos in the building, Aaron Rodgers, new guy, what is your feeling about allowing cameras in the building and your peers and colleagues? What do they think about it?
Well, I think from an ownership and an organizational standpoint, in some aspects, it's good for your brand, just because anytime you can have for example, the Arizona Cardinals talked about, it's big nationally for us. But, when you're a team like the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Jets, that's in the heart of the Big Apple, basically, to me, it takes away a little bit, in terms of the cameras are always around and you put in positions where you have to worry about some of the things that are said confidentially behind the scenes, or whether that's going to make the big screen or not. So I think it can be, a distraction, but at the same time, it's what the NFL fans want. They want behind the scenes, behind the curtains. And I think it's good for the NFL in some regards.
In Arizona, when you were the GM, 3 of the richest owners in the league were in your division, not yours, right? Paul Allen, Stan Kroenke may be the richest, Jed York. And fans all think everybody's playing under the same salary cap, so everybody has the same money. Yeah. That's not true. Stan Kroenke could write checks that the Bidwells couldn't. So you were always, as a GM, sort of working your way uphill. And that's the reality of a lot of GMs I talk to. It's like, you guys think it's all even in the media. It's not. So now we have this point where there's some free agents out there that haven't been signed, a couple of nice edge rushers. And there's marginal cap space for these teams. Take me to the light. Like, let's say the Rams right now have a bunch of kids and Aaron Donald on defense. They got a bunch of kids. They're, a lot of these teams got veterans. Dallas has got some guys who have been around. San Francisco. In the next 8 weeks, up to the trade deadline, so that would be like 12 weeks from today. How does a GM look at adding pieces? Because all of these teams in this league, outside of the Niners, have holes in their They got holes in their roster. How did you view it? Who would you pay for? Who wouldn't you? We just saw DeAndre Hopkins finally land. How did you view it? How do you improve your roster here to the trade deadline?
Well, I think two ways of looking at it. Anytime you can add a player that can improve your team that's done it before, like a DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, to me, that you certainly want to take a look at that situation. But at the same time, you have players that have done it before and then maybe come off injuries and different things like that. Like a Dwight Freeney, I signed him late in the process. And I was able to add a contract that was more so on sack incentives and those sort of things.
Sure.
So you have guys that if you dangle that carrot, it can be a huge win for both sides. Yet at the same time, usually when a guy's still out there, there's a reason. And it generally falls into probably injuries or pay because those guys are expecting a big paycheck to get off the couch. And that's why I always call it, Colin. I call it couch money. These guys have made so much money in their career. You have to put them in a position to make enough money where it's worth their while.
So Kyler Murray came out recently and said, I'm going to be coachable. I'm going to listen. And, for the first time in his career, he's got real doubters. I mean, if they win 2 football games and Caleb Williams is available, I would say this now. I would take the new kid. You know what I mean? I think I would take Caleb Williams. Kyler, he transferred in college. He didn't want to hear that. Do you think he's made money? He's a star quarterback. Do you think he can change? Are you concerned going forward for him?
Well, I think in terms of quarterback speak, Colin, what he said, you don't love it just because of the standpoint. When he added the word but in, generally behind a positive, the word but does not end in a positive light. So I certainly didn't want to hear that. And nor do fans want to hear a guy who's making $46.1 million a year blame anybody but himself. And I'm not saying that he's a guy that blames people. Yet at the same time, everybody, when you get that bag of cash, everybody expects you to take it on your shoulders. And that's what a franchise quarterback does. And this is a big year. I would have actually had Kyler in my top 5 for guys under pressure, because if they do have a tough year, he's coming off an injury. And also, Colin, you got to understand, he's coming off the injury. He's got to prove himself. And then what happens is what people forecast, which they have the number 1 pick, they're in a real predicament, just like you said.
Yeah, it is interesting. Steve Keim joining us. When you go into a season, and we were talking earlier about Saquon Barkley and how airline pilots don't make what they used to. Actors may not. Hollywood was bigger in the 70s and 80s. There's streaming and television, which has hurt my business. Everything is changing. Do you see anything in the NFL? One of the things that I've noticed, the middle of the football field over the last 10 years because of rule changes feels like it's the offenses. It used to be receivers had no interest going into the middle of the field when I was a kid. Now that feels like you can exploit that. That's the offensive part of the field that everybody wants to go over the middle of it. This whole running back situation, do you think it turns back eventually? We see it in baseball with analytics. Basketball now, you got to shoot threes. When you were GM, what were the changes you were noticing that were affecting draft day free agency and changes?
Yeah, I think Colin, I think that the back situation is a big one. Early on in my career, the backs were drafted so high and there was so much put on their shoulders. Now, I mean, you can have success as long as you have a really good schematical approach and you run the football with determination and you obviously put an emphasis on it. You can have success with, we've seen guys who are very solid 3rd, 4th round picks. So I don't know that that's ever going to change, especially when you also look at the lifespan of the running back in the NFL. When you get to 28, 29 years old, you're starting to look at an older player. So that is a real concern. I also think that there's been much more emphasis put on the 3rd corner, which is your nickel. Yeah. Those guys are on the field 70% or more. So you have to look at that as well. There's just a lot of different things now with corners and inside players in the secondary that there's just not enough of them to basically not only combat the rule changes, but as well the talent that's on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, it does feel like kids usually start changes culturally. And I've noticed it in Southern California. There's hundreds of receivers and quarterbacks. Nobody wants to be a running back. You even in the state of California, you got about 3 great high school running backs a year and 35 wide receivers. You told me this one time. This was a teaching moment. You told me when we met years ago, it's very easy to find a third solid receiver. It's virtually impossible to find a third great corner. It's really hard.
Right. And there's guys that are going 16, 17 in the first round that are third corners. So that is the real emphasis. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, especially with the success of the 7-on-7 game and the way these kids are raised now. I mean, I just think everybody wants to be playmakers. And you really – and I don't think the old adage hasn't changed. If you can't catch, you're going to defense.
That sounds so harsh, but it's so true. Steve Keim, we'll talk very, very soon. Steve, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.